Cardiometabolic is one of the biggest health challenges in the U.S., and evaluating patient risk across multiple conditions requires careful attention. With so many testing options and guidelines, getting a clear picture of patient health can still be a challenge. LabCorp brings clarity. Our cardiometabolic testing solutions support early risk assessment and empower more informed decision-making, so you can focus on what matters most, your patients. Visit LabCorp.com to partner with LabCorp and simplify complex patient profiles.
Welcome to Modern Mom Probs, where we're trying to solve the world's modern mom problems. And if we can't do that, at least we're having fun talking about them. I'm Tara Clark. Let's go. Hey, Modern Mom crew. Welcome back to another episode of Modern Mom Probs. I'm your host, Tara. Today's topic is raising teenagers in America. I am joined by Robyn Curnow. She is a South African journalist, podcaster, broadcaster, author. She was the anchor and foreign correspondent for CNN International and CNN USA. She has a new podcast out called Searching for America. It's a great listen. Robyn and I dive into all things raising teens in America and the nuance that comes with that. Robyn, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
I am so excited that you're here. I'm so excited to pick your brain about so many different things. You're a mom of teenagers. I am a mom of teenagers. You're a podcaster. I'm a podcaster. You're a journalist. I'm not a journalist, but in my like imagination, I sort of, I don't know, I could kind of like manifest
You
that.
think like one.
I think like a journalist. I definitely think like an interviewer. And that's really my strong suit. So I'm so excited you're here today. You have a new podcast out called Searching for America. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I'm excited about it as well because it's one of these spaces that is different for me because obviously I spent my career, being a foreign correspondent around the world, broadcasting on CNN and BBC. And I left that world behind and I've gone very local because I was trying to understand America. I live in suburban Atlanta. I'm a South African, Australian / Brit. And I was trying to understand America with empathy. There's so much anger and so much partisanship. And I looked around and I thought, when I'm trying to explain this country to my family around the world or friends, I'm like, but if you were to meet my neighbors, you would understand. Or my neighbor over here said this to me the other day and it explained something. And I realized that I could understand this moment we are in history, the sort of broader context, the politics, the geopolitics, if I just articulated like, oh, this is what it's like living in my neighborhood right now. And I look at it from an outsider perspective, but I'm clearly inside. And it's some of the quirks of being, an American mom. So I write and talk about sororities. My freshman joined a sorority, which was so confusing for me. Graduation, it's very different graduating from high school here in the States. And then broadly, I try and put, say, the Masters golf tournament, which is, just up the road from us here, into the perspective of America's national debt. So I kind of mush the local with the bigger picture. And it's kind of funny. And it's that very sort of wry outsider take that I hope people like. It's, no shouty politics. I think we need less of that.
I agree. I love it. I think it's fantastic. In another life, I was a sociologist in another life. And
there
so
it's the same
fascinated. I am fascinated by culture and American culture. And I love the perspective of you who was not raised here. And now here you are, and you're sort of soaking in all of these different cultures. I currently am taking Italian with a tutor who lives in Livigno, which is all the way in the northern part of Italy. Each week, she and I speaks half in English and half in Italian about American culture and Italian culture and so many different things. And I'd love to pick her brain on her observations and her family's observations about what's going on in the U.S. right now. And so it's interesting. And I could talk about that for an hour, both half in English and half in Italian. But
I think that's the interesting thing. And I think it's also just with raising kids is that sometimes there's a lot of noise and there's sort of the perception of Americans at their throats. But really, we're all going to school together. We're all raising our kids together. We're all neighbors. We all go to Halloween and, take each other a pie if somebody's sick. And, there's a lot more uniting Americans. There's a lot more commonality then I think sometimes if you switch on the news or that is there. And I kind of really think we all need to lean into that. yes, there are extremes politically, but most of us are in the center, toggling between, normal and sort of normal. And so I think, I think there's a lot more that is beautiful and common about our, living here. And I'm an new American citizen. I became a citizen a few years ago. My kids are American. They speak with American accents. I want this place to work and I want to belong and I want them to belong. I think identifying the things that connect us rather than divide us is far healthier too for everyone.
Absolutely. I agree 1,000%. I was down an absolute rabbit hole of your Instagram account. And I love your posts because I feel like almost each post is like a Substack in itself. And you did one about sororities, as you just mentioned there, and how your daughter joined one. And it was such a foreign concept to you because then your daughter was like, well, the immigrant mind can't comprehend this. But I have to say that even as an American, I'm from the Northeast, right? I'm from New Jersey. I lived in Manhattan for 10 years, came back to New Jersey. And there's things even within American culture that I don't fully understand, being geographically from where I am. Does that make sense? Like when I see the Southern, I guess that was like all the sorority rush. It was a big thing on TikTok. I don't even understand that. And I'm from America.
I know, and I didn't realize that at the time. I just thought all Americans did this sorority thing. And then I realized it was very much located in our, the sort of Southeast where we are, and just how seriously people take it and how it, if you look at it at face value, you think, oh no, this is just a bunch of mean girls with a lot of makeup, blow-dried hair doing these terribly synchronized dance videos that are very suggestive. And, it just feels like kind of a mean girls club. But I realized with my daughter going through Rush and then becoming part of one of Greek life, that actually, it's how you build, particularly here in the South, build relationships and networks that are really intrinsic to the way I think American society and American capitalism works. So I think it's a meritocracy. And particularly for girls, it's probably very useful in a way that I had to elbow my way by myself through with my career. I think the sorority system creates space for women, I think, to move into spaces that maybe they wouldn't be invited into or be allowed into. And I've come to support it. And I've seen how my daughter, has grown to understand how this community works, how to network, how to sell herself, how to belong to a committee, how does all of that good stuff that you have to do if you're going to succeed in corporate America. I think it's probably a good practical experience for her. But yes, I was slightly appalled at the beginning when she said she was going to Rush.
I think that's too funny. Yes, I was not involved in Greek life at Villanova, but my cousin was. And not only was she ultimately ended up being, my cousin is 2 years younger than I. We both went to Villanova University. Yeah. And she ended up being the president of her sorority. Yeah. So she had a leadership position.
And I think, that's what's so interesting. Listen, there's obviously a hierarchy of sororities in the South. If you're at the big SEC schools, if you're at Alabama or, Ole Miss, I think it's probably a whole different ball game. Whereas my daughter is at a sort of smaller, less intense football college. But yes, it is one of those things that I think from an outsider, even if you're from the Northeast or you're an outsider like me, you're like, what is this? It's a little icky, but what are they doing and why are they doing it? And please be nice to my child. But actually,
please
in the end,
take care of her.
Please don't reject her, but I do think it's giving her kind of it forces them to network and make friends in a way that particularly this generation, this post-COVID lot, who maybe are a little behind when it comes to social interactions and putting themselves forward and, assessing a room and, selling themselves. I think, funnily enough, I think the sorority has helped my daughter in her first year of university kind of navigate that without me, which is good.
That's brilliant. I think that's fantastic. I think that's such an interesting, fresh perspective on that. That is absolutely what you want. That's what you hope. All parents hope for their children to fly the nest successfully. What are some of, aside from sorority life and Greek life, what are some of the other most striking differences between your I don't want to say childhood. Let's talk about teen years, your teen years and the teen years of your daughters.
So I grew up in South Africa, which was a weird place to grow up at the time because it was during apartheid. So it was a very totalitarian society and obviously very racist. And it was a weird, violent place to grow up in. However, if you take away that broader context, I did grow up like many, kids who are, 50-year-olds now, growing up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, we were freer, and that I think there's a lot of our generation, Gen X, kind of looks back to that pre-internet, pre-cell phone time as sort of this idyllic age of being able to grow without having to sort of sell yourself on TikTok as a 16-year-old. So, I think even though I did grow up in a weird society, it is similar that, we were that last generation that was kind of untainted by social media and all of that. So I think the difference between American life and sort of South African, British, Australian growing up, I think kids are more structured here. I think there's more expectation of success. It's a bit more loosey-goosey where I came from. And I think this is, why America is one of the greatest countries, if not the greatest country in the world, is because kids, there's an expectation that to succeed is good. And that, it starts young. And particularly if you grow up in middle class, there's in a sense that you want to move forward. I mean, I just remember being kind of left to my own devices. Nobody expected very much from me. You know what I mean? I think you kind of had to, there's a lot of self-starting, whereas I really appreciate that here in the South. I mean, there's a lot of, the kid, even within the churches, plays such a huge role in families' lives, and the schools and, the soccer teams, which you start at 3, or gymnastics. And there's a sort of structure of your week that is very organized here that I suppose can be maybe a little claustrophobic for some people, but I find it fascinating. I have done a little bit of the opposite. I have underscheduled my kids here because I do think American kids are quite tired a lot of the time. And I'm a big believer in boredom.
Yes.
And so I have tended to sort of just let my kid, put a bit of effort in, just chill, go draw or read or just go and stare at the window or go play in the, whatever. So I have tried to underschedule my kids. I do think a lot of American kids are overscheduled.
I agree 1,000%. We in our household do the same thing. My son has his certain activities and we stick to those, but nothing more, nothing less. And if he chooses not to compete in a sport, like I'll give you an example. My son does American Ninja Warrior as a sport. He has classes every Tuesday. They've asked him multiple times to compete on the team. He says, no, thank you. I appreciate the offer. I'd rather not. I don't want it to ruin it for me. I love it. And I think that competing would ruin it for me. And I respect that. And that's his decision to make. And I've found from a young age, because he's 13 now, that when we chose to, and I'm using this in quotes, get off that train of you have to do soccer and you have to do every sport and every weekend is going to the different tournaments and stuff like that. For us personally, I can't speak for every family, but for us personally, it was so freeing and it was so healthy. And that was the right choice to make, that he could be bored and he could be with his friends or he could choose to be with us. And we have a very tight family unit. And that was the right choice for our family to get off that train of what we thought people expected of us as a suburban family to do.
I agree with you. So I've got a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old, and my 16-year-old plays lacrosse, which is a great sport. Also, had no idea, never. Anyway, so she also was good. And we went through that phase where she was on the club team and then the traveling team and then some other team. And then summers were spent sort of in, some god-awful hotel in, the back end of Pennsylvania or Maryland or Florida or something. So we went through 1 or 2 summers where we were sitting there in the 100-degree heat in some awful AstroTurf. And this child, everybody's drinking warm Gatorade, which is so bad for you. And, and I realized this child was I was unhappy. It was costing us a fortune and she wasn't playing very well and she was grumpy. And it was during that phase when she was 12, 13, 14. And I just realized this child's unhappy. We don't want to be, she doesn't need to be on the, the traveling lacrosse team and the lacrosse team and the super duper one. And then and then so I think we also made that decision. We pulled back. And she now just plays for her varsity, the school varsity team. We're just coming up to the end of the season, and it's been just a happy season of watching kids play school sport, there's nothing better. But I think, yes, taking away, school and then driving an hour to North Georgia for a practice, home by 9 p.m., Chick-fil-A in the back of the car for dinner. It's not happy. No one's happy.
Yes, exactly. It's funny that you mentioned Chick-fil-A because we do get Chick-fil-A on the way back from our American Ninja Warrior because it just happens to be on the way back. So that's what made me chuckle. So yes, I can relate to that one. Oh, there's so many different things I want to ask you because I just think it's fascinating. In your travels as both a journalist and a mother, you hear a lot of stories. You've interviewed a lot of incredible people. How do you filter through some of those stories? How do you know what to bring home, what lessons to bring home to the girls, and what lessons to leave out there? If you're anything like me, the outfit you live in is the one that you keep grabbing because it feels so good. And my absolute go-to, is the Cozy Earth brushed bamboo jogger set. I'm wearing them right now because, like I said, they're the first thing I grab to wear when I get dressed in the morning. Listen, I'm at a stage in my life where if it's itchy, stiff, or requires adjusting every 5 minutes, that's a hard no for me. But this set, it's soft, breathable, flattering. It looks put together. I could wear it while I'm working from home, running errands, making dinner, or, pretending that I have my life together at school pickup. And the comfort is next level. The brushed bamboo fabric gets softer wash after wash, which actually feels kind of rude to every other piece of clothing that I own. This actually moves with you. It holds up beautifully, and it feels like the kind of luxury moms deserve but rarely ever buy for themselves. Plus, Cozy Earth stands behind it with a 100-night trial and a 10-year warranty. That's not, hope you like it energy. That's straight up confidence. So this spring, give yourself the kind of comfort that stays with you all day. Head to CozyEarth.com and use my code MODERN for 20% off. And if you see the post-purchase survey, let them know that you heard about it right here on Modern Mom Probs. Cozy Earth, comfort lives here.
Cardiometabolic is one of the biggest health challenges in the U.S., and evaluating patient risk across multiple conditions requires careful attention. With so many testing options and guidelines, getting a clear picture of patient health can still be a challenge. LabCorp brings clarity. Our cardiometabolic testing solutions support early risk assessment and empower more informed decision-making, so you can focus on what matters most, your patients. Visit LabCorp.com to partner with LabCorp and simplify complex patient profiles.
Public?
It's a very good question, and I think it's moved. So the girls were born, and then I raised them while I was CNN's Africa correspondent. So I was pregnant, feeding, and then raising babies while I was the Africa correspondent. And so, it was breaking news in Africa. Something bad was happening quite regularly. And then I was trying to also just create a very safe environment in Johannesburg, which is generally a pretty unsafe place to live. And my husband and I both, so he also works in the news. And so, it wasn't like he was an accountant and I was, we were both embedded in it. And either one of us would often have to travel. And so we erred on the side of almost complete ignorance with our girls. We brought nothing home. We didn't have the TV on at all. We still don't. We actually keep a TV down in the basement. We never have news on, ever. Mm-hmm. The whole time these girls have been raised, there's never been a radio or a television, unless it is massive breaking news. I mean, the one time was the tsunami in Japan. This was probably 10, 15 years ago. And I sat down with my 4 or 5-year-old and just said, oh my goodness, look at the way the wave moves and stuff. So, but even then that she still has terrible fears about tsunamis, and we live in suburban Atlanta. So, it just shows you that even if you try and, you don't bring murders or rapes or, coups and violent overthrows or, all of that stuff, and you just even do bad weather, it still can impact them. So yeah, we have erred on having a quiet house. And so a lot of the conversations I had when one of us would be going off to do breaking news that was involved, say, a violent situation, I would, oh, mommy had a busy day. Oh, it was very interesting. 2 people were fighting. 1 person lost, but the other people around them are trying to fix the problem. I was very I hate to say it, I was very sort of blindly optimistic around them, because I do think at some point, and now I know, they're 16 and 19, they have the ability to interact with the world without feeling like it's collapsing around them.
Yes.
That they don't have this they can't control their world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is this generation that has been raised on, oh my God, with the climate, there's disaster climate conversations, disaster politics conversations, sort of disaster everything. And I think a lot of these kids feel totally disempowered to do anything with themselves because the problems seem so big and overwhelming. So when I do talk to my kids about sometimes news and stuff now, they're almost adults, and we frame it within an intellectual conversation. Oh, what do you think about China and intellectual property rights with AI? And you know what I mean? Like, I try and frame it in a very unemotional kind of intellectual way, rather than saying, oh my God, you won't believe what happened today. Someone did this or that. So yeah, I kept them ignorant for years, funnily enough.
No, I think that makes sense. Partially, especially when they get older, they learn on their own.
Yes.
We also have a quiet home. We do not watch the news. I read the news. We do not watch the news as a family.
Yes.
And a few months ago, when there was the terrible situation in Minnesota, I thought to myself, I should speak to my son about this. And so I sat down and I said, oh, Jack, there was a situation in Minnesota. And he said, oh, I know all about it, Mom. I saw it on YouTube. I was like, I don't have to start from scratch. And he's like, no. And then we had a discussion about it.
Yeah.
And he's at an age now where he can consume the news on his own. I was surprised. I was like prepping myself, and I was like, this is an important conversation. This is a serious conversation. And he's like, no. I already know. It's okay. You don't have to start from square one.
Yeah, and I think that was, for me, for me, it was really important that at least when those critical years, the sort of 0 to 10, that my kids didn't get cell phones until they were 13, mostly because I saw the kind of stuff that I was getting as somebody who was on television a lot, kind of sort of interactions from the general public. So I wanted to protect them from that. But so I just felt like I needed to give them a clean slate for that. I didn't, they didn't need TikTok at 5. That's just not healthy. So now is sort of teenagers who are consuming, whether it's TikTok or YouTube or whatever. I've had to have and for me, it's also again about the framing of perspectives. So what I don't want them to do is, suddenly take a point of view that they've only got one side because they've been watching an algorithm-based sort of YouTube generic, whatever. So I often play devil's advocate with them a lot. They'll come to me and say, oh, that was, whatever this thing happened. And I'm like, yeah, terrible. Wasn't that interesting? But what about? I really do firmly believe, particularly these kids and obviously in America and the world today, that if you're not careful, they become they see the world in black and white. And the world is not black and white. There's not good and evil. There's a very big spectrum in between. And I think for me, with my teenagers, kind of articulating the gray area and trying to toggle your understanding of something through a spectrum rather than sort of being absolutely dogmatic about a point of view, and then you're not open to somebody else's point of view because you disagree with them or because YouTube gave you a video. I think this generation needs to be able to kind of really articulate nuance and understand perspective in a way that doesn't make them feel threatened or that they've been assaulted by somebody else's idea. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I often play devil's advocate with my kids to the point that they said to me, well, where do you sit politically? And I said, where I sit politically, but I want you to see that people who think differently are not demons, or you know what I mean? There is a spectrum of perspective that you have to be able to understand and not judge in a way that shuts down conversation.
Brilliantly said, Robyn. Brilliantly said. That was like, brava. That was really incredible.
It's really important. I think it's the main.
It is. No, that's something that I think about all the time.
And I think I get upset when I see kids taking a position on big issues that they perhaps don't understand the nuances. So I've spoken to my kids and I explained it to them through, the world is quite confusing and scary at the moment. And I explained it to my kids. There's something called the horseshoe theory, where the extremes often land up sounding the same. They're closer. So if if your ideology is super left, and your ideology is super right, in many ways, if you think about the horseshoe, sometimes there's actually more in common between the super left and the super right than the rest of everybody in between. And the sort of intractability of dying on a hill over a specific issue or your thought process often makes you exactly the same as the person that you think you are virtue signaling against. And I find that happens quite a lot if you are not careful and if you piggyback on TikTok analysis of global affairs. And so because I've been a foreign correspondent for so long, and because I have a master's degree in international relations from Cambridge, and I've been and talked and seen these issues happen and history happen, it's never as clear cut as TikTok says it is. And I've tried to sort of articulate that with my kids, that spectrum and that ability to change your mind and the ability to sort of be flexible on stuff is probably a huge, huge benefit when you're with a whole bunch of people who are stuck taking a side and not actually seeing that they sound exactly like the people that they disagree with. So yes, so that's kind of the one way I've tried to articulate the world to my teenagers, who can get very emotional about what are clearly very upsetting political issues right now. I really think it's the ability to not take something personally, I think, and not throw your identity, your own personal identity, around somebody else's cause. I think it gives you more wriggle room to be a healthy adult. And I think if you have teenagers articulating themselves on somebody else's ideology or identity, it limits their ability to grow and to see the world in a healthy way. And this applies across the political spectrum. You know, whether you're in rural Georgia here or whether you're in sort of northeast, Seattle, I do think that sometimes these kids need to be taught that it's okay to change your mind and to have a flexibility of opinions rather than dying on some hill, which becomes groupthink rather than identity.
Absolutely. Brilliantly said. I agree with you 10,000%. And I'm so glad that you expressed it that way, because this message needs to be heard, and it needs to be heard again and again and again. And so thank you for sharing that. I was thinking, you said not taking things personally. So that reminds me of a poster that my son has in his room, and it is based upon an ancient Toltec concept. There are 4 agreements. It is never take anything personally, which you said that there, and I said, check. Do your best, which is something that we're all trying to do. Be impeccable with your words, and do not make assumptions. And we have that in my son's room for a reason. And every time I'm in there, I look at it and I read it again. And it's something that I think more people should keep in mind, that they should be impeccable with their words and not make assumptions and do their best and do not take things personally. And people sometimes will ask me, Tara, how do you do what you do and not take things personally or this and that? I'm like, because it's an ancient thing. I didn't make this up. It's just words to live by and rules to live by. And I think it's as important in Toltec society, civilization, as it is today.
And I think that's also the thing, going back to also what I was saying about these kids have been raised on kind of this disaster narrative, the climate, the politics, the world, whatever it is, whichever country you're in, but particularly here in America. And each side, and depending on which station you're watching or whatever, kind of articulates the sort of the world is collapsing. And I think with particularly kids these days who have so much access to all this news, and I've said it to my girls, it's like you can't fight every fight. You've got to also give them the ability to check out and say, you can't take these people's fight overseas as your own one. I would rather you figured out your friend group and how to navigate this weekend's party. Or I would rather you figured out if we wanted to go shopping on Saturday or Sunday at the mall. And I try and limit their timeline and try and give them a sense. I think it's about giving teenagers a sense of control. And the more they think that they have to fight for whichever oppressed group is sort of de jour of the day, it takes away their ability to actually implement change because they can't change somebody else's life. And so with a lot of we have these big conversations about obviously the state of the world and oppression and inequality. These are really important big things. But I think particularly with teenagers now, I've given mine the permission to say, okay, I do want you to join then a sorority and figure out the banner you're going to paint at the ball in 3 weeks' time. And it's an ocean theme. I want you to enjoy that. I want you to get something out of that instead of kind of obsessing about these very big issues that'll impact your life. So I'm also about trying to ring fence them to allow them to have a childhood.
Absolutely. I was asking my son just the other day, I don't even know how it came up into the conversation. What are some thoughts that are on your mind right now? You and your friends, what are you thinking through? And you know what he said? He said, we're worried about nuclear war.
You see, I know.
And we're worried about AI.
Yeah.
What type of jobs will we be able to do? And those are the two things that were on the minds of the 13-year-old.
If you're anything like me, the outfit you live in is the one that you keep grabbing because it feels so good. And my absolute go-to is the Cozy Earth brushed bamboo jogger set. I'm wearing them right now because, like I said, they're the first thing I grab to wear when I get dressed in the morning. Listen, I'm at a stage in my life where if it's itchy, stiff, or requires adjusting every 5 minutes, that's a hard no for me. But this set, it's soft, breathable, flattering. It looks put together. I could wear it while I'm working from home, running errands, making dinner, or, pretending that I have my life together at school pickup. And the comfort is next level. The brushed bamboo fabric gets softer wash after wash, which actually feels kind of rude to every other piece of clothing that I own. This actually moves with you. It holds up beautifully, and it feels like the kind of luxury moms deserve but rarely ever buy for themselves. Plus, Cozy Earth stands behind it with a 100-night trial and a 10-year warranty. That's not, hope you like it energy. That's straight up confidence. So this spring, give yourself the kind of comfort that stays with you all day. Head to CozyEarth.com and use my code MODERN for 20% off. And if you see the post-purchase survey, let them know that you heard about it right here on Modern Mom Probs. Cozy Earth, comfort lives here.
Cardiometabolic is one of the biggest health challenges in the U.S., and evaluating patient risk across multiple conditions requires careful attention. With so many testing options and guidelines, getting a clear picture of patient health can still be a challenge. LabCorp brings clarity. Our cardiometabolic testing solutions support early risk assessment and empower more informed decision-making, so you can focus on what matters most, your patients. Visit LabCorp.com to partner with LabCorp and simplify complex patient profiles.
I'm here on a job site with Tim, who owns his own electrical contracting business.
3 employees and 2 work trucks.
Tim traded up to Geico Commercial Auto Insurance. We're positively here where he needs us most.
They sure are.
With step-by-step help on all his insurance needs, all for shockingly low rates.
Shockingly low, huh?
Just a little bit of electrician humour. Do you get it?
I got it.
It feels like we have a real connection. All right, I'll stop.
Get a commercial auto insurance quote today at geico.com and see how much you could save. It feels good to Geico.
And that's, and I think, and justifiably so, because there's a lot of that out there right now. And I get it too with mine. And there are moments where I'm like, we'll deal with this when we get there. With my freshmen at college, there is this conversation about what do they study? Because are we paying for the huge amounts for these college degrees and they're going to be utterly unemployable or unemployed because in 4 years' time their job doesn't exist? And so I realized I was also probably showing some anxiety about that too. And then I actually said to her, you know what? Whatever happens, happens. I want you to go there and choose the subjects that are interesting to you. But I also want you to think that, I don't want you taking how to play the violin in ancient Egypt with your left hand course. You know what I mean? I don't need you to be a feminist understanding of how to tie your shoes in Turkmenistan. You know what I mean? I really don't need you to do that. I want you to take courses that are somehow relevant to the universe right now. Go out there, learn how to think, learn to learn, build some friendships, go and party, go and bicycle or go and do your own thing. And then in 4 years or in 3 years, we're going to have a conversation about whether we need to amp up some sort of extra course or something to deal with the AI stuff. But we can't control. I mean, we have nobody knows where AI is going. And even with the Iran stuff that's happening now, there's sort of what's happening. Yes, it's closed, straits closed, not closed, nuclear, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'm also of the opinion sometimes, and I'm a journalist and a curious person. I'm like, I can't read anymore. I've got to switch off. Tell me when this is over. Do we really need to be knowing, is it on, is it off, what's happening, maybe we all just actually also need to switch off and say, at some point, this is going to be resolved. And if it's not, we'll make a plan. So maybe that's a cop-out, I don't know. But I feel like there's so much information for all of us. I feel like perhaps ignorance is bliss sometimes, particularly when raising teenagers.
Human beings were never designed to consume the amount of news that we consume in the course of a given day, to just make the decisions that we make in the course of a given day. Grab this device in our hands 100 times a day, unlock it, read the news, put it back, go about our life, cook dinner, spend time with our family. Humans were not designed for this modern life. So we're just trying our best in this modern world to live the best lives that we can. With our friends and
which
family.
Is why I think maybe we go old school, and you just kind of batten down the hatches. I think to myself, my grandmother lived until 101. She died last year.
Bless her. Wow.
Really bless her. She was fabulous. And she was English. And so she spent her teenage years in England, in the north of England during the war. And very clearly remembered German bombs coming and dropping. But she had incredibly fond memories of that time in her life. And I think to myself sometimes, even if it's World War II and Germans are dropping bombs near you, you can still have a childhood. She was still felt safe within her home and within her little community. And it was probably because they weren't getting blow-by-blow Twitter accounts of Hitler and his last move, and how the Allies were failing, and what this war, you know what I mean? And, So obviously they had a sense of ignorance in terms of the news they were consuming about the state of the war day by day. And I sometimes think back to that and I said, do you remember, Granny, when you heard about like what had happened in the camps? And she goes, I didn't really know until the end what was happening. And you realize she just they went on with their day to day. And so I think for me, raising these kids in this crazy information overloaded world, I've kind of tried to sometimes take us back to my grandmother's time where we're like, okay, we're working on a need to know basis, bigger picture here. We're just going to control what we can control and not listen to some of this stuff and not be, furious and flabbergasted every day.
Yes, I understand. We have a similar story. My husband's grandmother grew up in Sicily during the war.
Yeah.
And when there were bombing raids, she would have to hide in the basement, and she was scared about that. But in the other times, she would tell wonderful stories about how she used to feed her horse too much bread, and she made her horse so fat that he couldn't move anymore. So she did have wonderful stories during that time. And again, same thing, that she didn't necessarily know the scope of what was going on in the world at the time, but she could still tell us stories about that time and then still make us laugh about feeding the horse too much bread. And he wasn't a workhorse anymore. He was just a roly-poly thing.
I mean, isn't that great? And that's sort of the ability of the human, to be human and to just sort of be safe in your local moment and in moment, I think is just such an important thing right now.
I agree. I have personally had some criticism where people said, Tara, you're not shouting from the mountaintops enough and you're not doing this. And then I heard a friend of mine who was starting a podcast say, Tara, I recently heard that some of the best podcasting and the best political work is done in microdoses. As opposed to shouting on the rooftops every time. It's microdose it here and microdose it here and microdose the message there. That really stuck with me. And I thought
very, very good way of describing it.
Thought so too. And so here we are doing that. And also
advocating microdoses. There we go.
Healthy microdoses. Yeah. No, I think it's very important. I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests, and I'm very curious to see what you're going to say. Robyn, what do you think is the biggest modern mom problem today?
I think the biggest problem today is that as mothers, we're far more invested in our children's lives than perhaps our mothers were. And I think that the biggest lesson I've learned in the last year has been letting my eldest child leave. And, there's that old saying, you've got to raise a child to give it wings or something like that. I don't know.
Yes.
But it's incredibly difficult not to jump in there to try and pack their dorm room or decorate their dorm room or buy them a car so that they're safe all the time. And I think the ability to pull back from micromanaging, not microdosing, is a really important skill that moms have to really actively work on. Because I think particularly working women, we got a plan, we got a schedule. This is how we're going to implement it. This is the outcome I would like to get that. You know what I mean? There's sort of a dynamism to how we succeed. And I think the ability to not do that, particularly for these kids who need to leave home, and they need to leave home in a way that they can grow and be healthy and look after themselves. And I think I've seen it with some of the people that I'm around, some of the moms, they are over-managing their freshman college kid in a way that I don't think is healthy, or that college kid is not going to want to come home at Christmas or at Easter because they're going to get bossed around. And I think pulling back as a mom, not fixing things is a constant work in progress. None of us are perfect, but that to me I feel like that's really important. You let them fail.
Yes, let them fail. That's something that I've struggled with personally. I'm much better about it now, but it's a work in progress. A fantastic quote that I heard relating to this is, step out so they can step in.
There you go. That's beautiful.
So yeah. I will leave it on that note. Robyn, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always good to remind us that, remind ourselves that we're doing okay and that, this is a village and we all need as much help from each other as we can get, because it's not easy.
Absolutely. Robyn, where can we listen to the podcast?
Anyway, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get it. So searching for America. And I do actually have a Substack. So if you don't have the time to listen to the podcast, please go to my Substack, which is actually my name, Robyn Curnow, ROBYNCURNOW. I'm sure you'll put a link up. And so the Substack is kind of a quick read of whatever kind of quirk I'm drawing attention to in my neighborhood at the time.
Love it. I particularly enjoyed the one about bars in Utah.
Yes.
Because that's fascinating.
America.
You want to talk about different parts of America. I'm fascinated by Mormon culture. It's sort of new to me only since I became a content creator. It fascinates me. And so I thought that was a really interesting read.
That was an interesting holiday. Yes, we went to Utah for spring break and I kept on getting carded. And I was like, well, I know I'm using an age-defying moisturizer, but this is getting ridiculous.
I love it. Your skin does look gorgeous.
Well, I shouldn't be being carded. Let's just put it that way. I've been drinking since George H.W. Bush was president. We're way beyond me being carded.
Fantastic, Robyn. Thanks so much for being here.
All the best. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Modern Mom Probs. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive in today's problem with me, your host, Tara Clark. Join me next time when I'll be interviewing another great guest.
and tackling another modern mom problem. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review and a rating. As always, you can head over to Modern Mom Probs on Instagram and give me a follow, or check out my book, Modern Mom Probs, A Survival Guide for 21st Century Mothers, available online wherever books are sold. Well, that's it for today. See you next time, folks.
I'm here on the job site with Dale, who's a framing contractor.
Hey, good morning.
Dale traded up to Geico Commercial Auto Insurance for all his business vehicles. We're here where he needs us most.
Yep, they sure are.
We make it easy for him to save on all his insurance needs, all in one place, with coverage that fits his business and bottom line. Oh, I shouldn't have looked down.
It's all right.
We're so far up here.
Look at me. Take a deep breath.
Oh, I'm good. So good.
Get a commercial auto insurance quote today at geico.com and see how much you could save. It feels good to Geico.